next question. Are screen time limits really that important? That's a question that we get. I think that's kind of something that we'll be hearing all the time, because in the last 2 years of the lockdown, we've had children only on their screens with no other activity.
Yeah, and it feels like all those screen time limits that we had been preached to about kind of went out the window, right? In the pandemic, because our children were having to do remote learning. So they were on computers all day. And, you know, how did that really, it seemed like there was some mixed messaging going on there.
Exactly.
So let's just, the elephant in the room is that all of the research says that you should limit screen time for your kids. Now, the question becomes, what is that limit? Okay. And for me, it wasn't so much about the amount of time they spend on the screen, but the quality of what they're watching. If, as we learned during remote learning, if they're on their screen for 6 hours a day, but it's all learning, well, then that doesn't seem like a bad thing necessarily, right? But if what they're consuming in their screen time is programming that is contrary to the values that you're trying to teach them, then that screen time becomes detrimental to them. One of the big things over here in the United States are violent video games, right? Our young children are playing games where there are, you know, lots of violence, lots of killing. Some of it can be very graphic with blood and things like that. And so when we're talking about, well, is that good for your kids to do for 6-7 hours a day? I think we can all agree that that's not good. So really, as opposed to the quantity of time they're spending on the screen, we really need to focus on the quality of what they're watching and what they're engaging in. And so, you know, now that my children are adults and they're watching some of the shows that I didn't allow them to watch as children, they're coming back to me and saying, well, we understand why you told us this wasn't appropriate for us at a younger age. And so that's really where our focus needs to be. The other thing about this is social media. Social media, Facebook, things like that are here to stay. They're big business. And when our children become engaged in clubs and sports teams and things like that, those teams and clubs often communicate with their members via social media, just like we've been communicating with you for this group, right? So obviously the usefulness of social media means it's not going away. So we as parents really have a responsibility to introduce our children to social media on our terms with our guidance, which means we need to educate ourselves about what's a good way for our children to be introduced to social media and what's a perhaps even dangerous way, because we know there are criminals who use social media also to victimize children. And so we really need to educate ourselves to be able to introduce our children to social media in ways that are healthy and safe. I actually have an entire blog post about the social media topic specifically, if you wanted more tips on that. But when it comes, so to summarize, right? When it comes to screen time, it's clear that letting our children be on screens all day, every day, not the best thing for them. However, some screen time is going to be necessary for learning and also for social development. And so we really need to be in the details as parents about what they're watching, who they're communicating with, and what they're doing when they're on their screen.
Right. And I think everyone will agree. I mean, I think everyone will agree how it was so strange how educators were screaming, no to screen time in 2020, right up till 2020.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it was like an overnight change.
Yes.
Where everyone moved from no screen time, limit screen time, to just
hours and hours,
6 hours and 7 hours of continuous screen time.
Yes.
So it's something that we have to accept, but at the same time, I think you had a couple of very good tips that we did put up on the group today, on how to pay attention to your child while your child is using the screen.
Yes.
It's very important that we don't face the screen towards a wall,
Yes.
or we have our screens in a public room where the rest of the family participates as well.
Yes.
And as far as possible, we don't encourage our children to take their screens to bed with them.
Yes.
That was a very good
Yes,
point.
because that is a huge issue, especially over here in the United States. I would imagine it's an issue there too, where our kids are taking their phones into their bedrooms, our teenagers, and they're not sleeping. They're on their phones until midnight, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. And I mean, that's just, first of all, there's nothing good that happens at that time of night on the internet. And
there's nothing that happens at that time of the night on the internet that can't happen during the day. So they
exactly.
they can use their screen during the
and
day.
It's interrupting their sleep cycle. And we know how important, we haven't touched on sleep, but we know how important sleep and getting adequate sleep is for the success of our children in their academics, for one thing, but just in life. They need that sleep. And so it robs them of that. So,
have you ever had a parent asking you, like talking to you about the kind of tantrums that children throw when they are restricted from their screens?
yes. So this is why it's very important to set up guidelines and family rules for devices from the very beginning. You know, we are giving our children mobile phones, right? From younger and younger ages. And so it's tantamount to be able to set up those rules and guidelines from the moment you give them those devices. And one of those rules, like you were saying, is this device needs to stay in the family room in a public area. This device gets plugged in and charged overnight down away from your bedroom, not in your bedroom, for example. So if you're able to impose those rules, the other rule that you impose as a parent that is helpful is that your child knows that you can take their device at any time and read anything you want to read. You can read their text messages. You can read their WhatsApp messages. You are the parent. You are paying for the phone. You are paying for the service. And therefore you have the responsibility. It's not the right. It's the responsibility to keep them safe. And the way that you keep them safe is by these rules. So now, if you haven't done that from the beginning, and now they're a teenager and you're trying to impose these rules on them, you're absolutely going to have a problem. They're going to fight you on that. They are in a position and an age where they're trying to assert their independence, right? They're trying to show that they are, and that's it. And that's natural for that age. That is what we want. We want this gradual progression of independence in our children through their teenage years, so that when they do leave our home, they are independent and able to sustain themselves. So that's a good thing. So what we need to do at that point, I work with parents to help them step by step bring their children on board with understanding that even though we haven't done it this way in the past, this is the safest way to do it now. We're making a change, and change sometimes is painful, but this is what we're doing. So it's sort of a step-by-step process if they're a teenager and you're trying to impose these rules.
And haven't you noticed that if you have a really good rapport with your children, and you are so understanding that when they come to you with a topic, they are more than willing to understand when you explain a situation to them.
Yes, they are. And you know what, Crystal, we'll go into this in depth on Thursday night in our workshop, that we are going to try to establish ourselves as a parent that is rational, reasonable, and thoughtful. And if we establish ourselves as that kind of parent from the very beginning, then as they go through those years between 10, 11, 12, up to 14, 15, 16, if we've established ourselves as rational, reasonable, and thoughtful people who have their best interest in mind, we will have so much easier time when they're teenagers, communicating with them, continuing to guide them, and even into adulthood. It is so rewarding to have your adult kid come back to you and ask your opinion. I have my middle child right now is trying to decide between two different internships for this summer. And he's coming to my husband and I and asking our opinion. He's 23 years old. He certainly can make the decision. And that's what we've told him. The decision is yours. But I thank him for coming to me and asking for my opinion and asking for me to weigh in on what might be best for him, because I'm further down the road, I'm more experienced, and we've established ourselves with them, with our children, right? We're rational, we're reasonable, we're thoughtful, we love them, we have their best interest in mind. So that's the payoff with that. That is the payoff.
So true.